Hi, it's Knowles. Tonight's story is dedicated to Jordan and Michaela and is called The Mariella of the Lost Reef. The midday sun burned down overhead, casting a harsh, bright glare across an ocean that seemed to stretch out into infinity. Cole was anchored off the remote coast of eastern Australia, near the Coral Sea. He stood at the stern of his modest salvage boat, his eyes fixed on the chaotic white foam where the open sea slammed into jagged, uncharted edges of the Lost Reef. For 3 centuries, this stretch of water had been a graveyard for sailors and a black hole for treasure hunters. The reef was a nightmare of razor-sharp coral and deceptive rushing currents that kept the bones of the dead completely hidden from the surface world. It was a place guarded by the sea itself, where any ship that dared to draw close was torn to pieces, long before its crew could ever glimpse what lay beneath. Cole was a recovery agent of the old school, a man who relied on a weathered map, an iron will, limited scuba gear rather than heavy underwater drones or submersibles. Today the water inside the reef's inner ring was very still, a quiet mirror that gave no hint of the violent tides moving just inches below. After checking the heavy diver's knife at his belt, Cole pulled his rubber dive mask over his face and took a final deep breath of the salt air, adjusted his tank and regulator, and slipped over the edge of the boat, entering the water with the silent grace of a hunter. The sun vanished behind him, replaced by a deep, haunting green twilight as he kicked downward into the heart of the labyrinth. The deeper Cole swam, the more the world narrowed into an eerie maze of towering coral, walls, and dark underwater canyons. Following a trail of shattered ballast stones, he rounded a massive ridge and found it, the wreck of the Mariella. The legendary galleon did not look like a tourist attraction. It was completely wedged into a deep, jagged fissure in the reef, its ancient black timbers twisted and broken by the immense weight of the sea. It was hidden so perfectly within the shadows of the coral that 100 ships could sail directly over it and see absolutely nothing but empty water. Gliding through a ruined hatchway into the captain's old quarters, Cole's hand struck something solid buried beneath centuries of compressed sand. He dug with his gloved hands, his fingers brushing past rotted leather until they found the heavy iron straps of a sea chest. The lock was massive, a block of rusted iron, fused shut by time. Cole drew his dive knife, jammed the thick blade into the seam of the lid, and threw his entire weight against the handle. With a sharp, muffled crack that sent a cloud of dark silt swirling into the water, the ancient wood splintered. Inside the cavity sat a small, unblemished box made of smooth green jade stone. It was cold, unnaturally so, and as Cole's fingers closed around it, a strange, heavy silence fell over the entire sunken ship. Holding the jade box tightly against his chest, Cole kicked hard against the deck timbers and began his ascent. But the moment the artifact was pulled from its resting place, the calm waters of the reef turned hostile. A low, visceral hum began to vibrate through the water, a sound so deep it rattled in Cole's chest and made the coral walls around him groan. The light from the surface began to fade rapidly, not from clouds but from a sudden unnatural shadow that seemed to bleed directly out of the deep ocean trenches outside the reef. Cole's lungs began to burn. His dive tank was empty, but the exit to the open water was changing. The fine white sand on the seafloor was rising in giant twisting pillars, turning the clear green water into a blinding swirling fog of grey silt. The ancient curse of the Mariella had finally woken up to protect its secret, and it was closing the doors of the reef. Cole fought his way through the blinding darkness, his hand tracing the rough coral walls by touch alone as the water around him began to churn like a whirlpool. From the swirling vortex of sand and black water, a massive entity began to take shape right in Cole's path. It was a leviathan, born of the reef's dark memory, a colossal shifting serpent formed entirely out of heavy currents and grinding ocean sediment. It had no eyes, yet it turned its massive shadowy head directly towards the lone diver, letting out a deep frequency rumble that sent shockwaves through the water. The force of the movement slammed Cole backwards, his shoulders striking the hard coral, as the creature lashed out with a tail compressed foam and stone. Cole was completely outmatched by the raw power of the ocean, his vision beginning to blur at the edges from the lack of oxygen. The serpent lunged again, its watery maw opening to swallow him and the treasure back into the dark. Cole didn't freeze. Using his last ounce of strength, he unclasped his heavy lead weight belt and dive tank, letting them drop into the abyss. The sudden buoyancy shot his body upwards like an arrow, narrowly escaping the gasping maw of the silt monster as it snapped shut on empty water. With the creature roaring behind him, Cole tore through the swirling fog of sand, his chest bursting with pain, as he pushed his body to the absolute limit. The dark shadow chased him up through the narrow coral canyons, but as the water grew brighter, the monster's form began to break apart, unable to hold its shape in the shallow, sunlit waters near the surface. With one final desperate kick, Cole broke through the surface of the ocean, gasping in the sweet warm air as he hauled himself over the rail of his salvage boat and collapsed onto the deck. He lay there for a long time, the sun warming his frozen skin as his heart raced and finally began to slow. The sea outside the boat was completely calm once more, the dark shadow vanishing back into the deep as if it had never existed. Cole sat up slowly, his fingers trembling slightly, as he reached for the jade stone box resting on the deck beside him. He pressed the hidden latch, and the lid swung back to reveal a large, rough-cut gemstone that glowed with a brilliant, dangerous crimson fire. It was the Crimson Eye, a piece of lost history. It was won not by machines, but by raw human courage. Cole smiled, slipped the stone into his jacket, and steered his boat towards the open horizon.